Okay, so today I'm going to share some rules of money that are incredibly important to understand and potentially to adhere to. So we're going to just jump into this right now. We don't want to beat around the bush, but if you're new here to the channel and you want to learn more about these topics, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you drop a like on the video, and let's just get started here. So the first thing that we need to understand is that money is simply just a tool. And I hear so many people from time to time saying that money is inherently evil. It's something that you should never think about or consider. And I think this is kind of the wrong idea. Now, while money and finances can certainly skew people's morals and corrupt certain people, it's something that's simply just a tool, and it can be used for good and for bad. And so the point here is that, let's just take, for example, let's say that you wanted to fix a homeless problem in, say, your local city, right? And so one stance could be, well, you could go and donate 30 hours a week at the local homeless shelter. Now that could be very, very effective, and obviously everybody appreciates that very much. Or if you had money, what if you built 100 homeless shelters? So you see kind of the point there that it's not necessarily that money's evil. There's certainly things that you can do with it that can be very beneficial to society, to others. So kind of having the mindset that you should never think about it, that you should never desire having any money, I think is sort of a flawed way to think about it. So just understand that it's a tool that can be used for good or for bad. Now, the next one here is to think about taxes. Now, for some reason, whenever we make a video about taxes on this channel, while I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor, sometimes we discuss ways to save money with taxes, and people tend to just not really care about it. They don't click on the videos, they don't watch the videos when we talk about taxes, but people are leaving so much money on the table by simply not filing for their tax returns for 2020. We're coming up on tax season here. People don't like thinking about it, but I see so many people leave money on the table because they don't understand how it works. They don't understand how they're taxed, how they can get rebates, how they can get money back from the government that they've already paid, and how they can just save money all around the board. So understand your income tax. Just take a day and start to just do some simple Google searches about Pennsylvania income tax, California income tax, wherever you live, and learn about how you're taxed. Look at the FICA taxes. Maybe I just love accounting and I love talking about this, but generally it's something that you want to just be very aware of. What are your property taxes? Are there ways to lower those types of taxes? And trust me, there's always sort of loopholes you can get around with to end up saving more money on taxes, and who wouldn't want to do that? It's pretty logical. You'd want to probably save some money on taxes, and I'm telling you, if you're not doing that, you're going to want to look into it. So always be very aware of how you're taxed. And the next point here is that you're not taking money to the grave with you. While we talk about financial independence quite a bit on this channel and we discuss how to create financial freedom, it's also very essential to realize that, well, at least from my perspective, that once I'm dead, my money's not going to be any use to me. Maybe my family, maybe my children, if I have some children in the future. But for the most part, I want to make sure that I'm using my money, that I'm not squirreling it away forever. So there's sort of a line to be drawn somewhere, and I certainly have a line drawn for myself of saving money and making sure that you're building a good financial future for yourself, but also enjoying some of the money or some of the assets that you have. So if you're a multi-millionaire and you're still living in a $400 a month apartment, and you're not paying for health insurance, and your car's always breaking down, and you have to take the bus all the time, and you're being kind of cheap about it, well, once you die, and your money's not going to be any use to you. So I think there is sort of a level there where it's okay to spend some money if you already have that nice financial net going for yourself. All right, so the next rule is to build some type of buffer. Now look, I've said this before, but every time that any of my friends from college or anybody around me says, Nate, what do I do? What's the first step to just creating some peace of mind with finances, with money? It's simply just create a buffer. So if you are living paycheck to paycheck, and it doesn't matter if you're making $100,000 a year or $10,000 a year, just having a buffer of $1,000, of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever you can afford, build it up, and it's sort of this emergency fund, and it's going to give you such peace of mind if you lose your job, if something happens, if suddenly you have to pay for a $2,000 random expense that pops up out of nowhere. You can cover it, and it's just going to give you, it's going to alleviate so much pressure. I've seen it from time to time from so many people. And as I said, I'm not a financial advisor, but this is just something that I think everybody needs to have, is an emergency fund or some type of buffer that you can then start worrying about paying off your debt. You can then start worrying about all these other things in life, but just having that buffer, incredibly important. So the next rule here that you really want to consider is what we're going to call the law of capital. See, we can kind of tie this back into economics a little bit, but there's really two types of capital. There's physical capital and there's human capital. So we could think about how we invest, right? And so maybe you could buy real estate, you could have gold, you could have cash in your hands. That would be physical capital. But then there's also something called human capital, and this is something that I think everybody should really just be aware of, and that is by thinking about investing into yourself. So for example, if you wanted to build your human capital, you could read books, you could go to college, you could spend $100,000 on a college education. Is it worth it? Maybe, maybe not. Statistically, it still is worth it to go to college in most cases, or you could just find ways to increase your knowledge, right? And it's hard to put a price on that, and that's why I actually reached out to Audible to see if they wanted to sponsor this video. And they said yes. So you can start listening with a 30-day Audible trial, absolutely free. You get one free audiobook, and then you get 2 Audible originals, absolutely free for a 30-day trial. So I will leave a link down below. It's gonna be audible.com/NateO'Brien. That's audible.com/NateO'Brien, or just text Nate O'Brien to 500-500. That's Nate O'Brien to 500-500. But they have a number of different selections on there that you can listen to. I love to do this when I'm just on a train somewhere, I'm on a plane, I'm going for a run somewhere, and it's nice to just be able to listen to a book and continuously build my human capital. It's a wonderful investment from my perspective. And right now I'm listening to The Alchemist, which I'm not sure how I haven't gotten to this one yet. It's a 2020 and I'm finally getting to this audiobook. But like I said, I will leave a link down below, and you guys know I very rarely do any sponsors on this channel. I only work with companies that I truly find very valuable and ones that I actually use myself. So let's move on with this video and let's talk about the next sort of rule of money or law of money that I think is very essential, and that is understanding that there are different types of debt that can be good or bad. There's good debt and there's bad debt. Now, this is kind of an area where a lot of people go wrong, where maybe they just assume that all debt is absolutely terrible and they should stay away from it. Now, some people might want to do that, especially if you've had a lot of problems paying off bills, paying off debt in the past. But it's okay to understand that, look, there are types of debt that people can actually use for leverage. They can make money off of those types of debt. For example, real estate. Now, this goes wrong in some cases. Look at when people are buying houses in 2005, 2006, even 2007 at peak prices, and then they came crashing down. It didn't really work out when people were really leveraging their money, and maybe they had no job, no income, and they were getting a $300,000 mortgage. That did happen about 12 years ago or 13 years ago now. But there are good types of debt and there are bad types of debt. So generally speaking, the way that I think of this for myself is the bad types of debt are anything that is a high interest, not secured debt. So things like credit card debt, where you might be paying 25% annual interest rates, things like personal loans, things that are generally higher interest rates. And then there's something that we can consider sort of good types of debt, or at least from my perspective, ones that I'm willing to go into debt for. So for example, something to increase my knowledge, something to increase my education, like student loans, could be considered a good type of debt because it's essentially an investment. See, when you're using a credit card to buy a bigger TV, that's not an investment, or at least hopefully that's not an investment. But if you are taking out $20,000 so that you can get your master's degree so that you can make more money, that would be seen as a fairly good type of debt. It doesn't always work out, of course. Sometimes people take out $250,000 in student loans and then they end up working at 7-Eleven because they went for a degree that just has no money in it and they couldn't get a job, they failed out of college. There's a lot of cases like that, but that's a good type of debt. There's also ones like if you get into real estate investing and you want to buy $1 million apartment complex, you want to buy 4 units, 6 units for apartments, and you don't have $1 million on hand, well, you can consider taking out a loan, a mortgage from the bank and kind of leveraging your money in some cases. But as I said, big disclaimer, sometimes things go wrong, but there's a lot of real estate YouTube channels out there that I think are really interesting. Somebody like Meet Kevin has some great videos on that, so you can always check that out if you're interested in leveraging your money and using good types of debt to make more money. But credit card debt, personal loans, any type of high interest debt that's not an investment, I would probably stay away from if I were you. All right, so this next one is one of my favorites. It's called lifestyle inflation. And this is why people who win the lottery go broke. This is why a lot of professional athletes go broke. Even though they make millions of dollars, they have something called lifestyle inflation. So I remember back when I was in school, there were a couple of kids whose parents would pick them up in really nice cars. Sometimes they were Escalades or some Porsches, and so you would always just assume that these people must be really wealthy, they must be rich. But once I got older, I realized that most of those parents they were poor because they maybe were making $150,000 per year, but they were spending $200,000 per year. They were spending more than they were making. And so this is why a lot of people who think that money will fix their issues of if they're poor now and they have no money now, that if they just make more money, it's going to fix their problems. For a lot of cases, that's not true. And it's not true because they don't have the basic understanding of finances and a great financial groundwork in order to actually start to save, to start to build wealth, to start to invest. And so just remember lifestyle inflation, that if you're making $1,000 a month now and you scale it up to $10,000 a month, but when you're making $10,000 a month, you go out and you buy a really nice car. You go out and you get an expensive penthouse apartment. That's lifestyle inflation. As I've been scaling my income over the past couple of years quite drastically, my expenses have stayed somewhat the same. I've increased them ever so slightly, but not at the rate of which they would be. The next one that I kind of want to bring up here is that money generally follows attention. So this is something that I did with this channel. You don't have to do the same thing, but generally speaking, understanding this idea that money follows attention is going to help you make a lot more in the future. So just by thinking about it, that you don't always want to go just for the money right away. For example, for this channel, I started this almost 3 years ago now, and I really didn't make any money on this channel for the first year. Then the second year I made a little bit, and then the third year it's been starting to roll in a lot faster. But I did that because I didn't want to focus on the money, but realized that if I could get more attention, if I could get more views on my videos, if I could put out more videos, that generally the money will follow later down the road. This is why anybody who's famous, like think about your favorite musician, think about your favorite athletes, your favorite comedians, they make a lot of money because then they can just hold up like a Pepsi and they can get $2 million for just cracking a Pepsi on TV for doing almost nothing. That's why Audible sponsored this video, because now my videos get some views on them. So if you just remember the idea that money follows attention, it doesn't have to be your personal brand. It can be anything that can get you attention. It can be your own brand that has no face attached to it, a website, anything whatsoever. Now, it's also essential to understand your loans. It absolutely baffles me how many friends I have who will get a new car and they will have the car dealer show them that they might owe $400 a month, or they'll say you're gonna owe $350 a month, but they never ask what's the actual interest rate on this, what's the interest that I'm paying, an annual rate. And so understand your loans very well. If you're getting a mortgage, don't just look at the monthly payment, look at the interest rate and then understand what's the average, how can you get a better interest rate. In most cases, that's going to be improving your credit, getting a higher credit score. It's going to help you in so many other areas of your life. We have videos on that, on how to fix bad credit, on how to build your credit as high as possible to get you better loans overall. But just understanding everything related to loans, your student loans, what are your interest rates on that? Are you going to tackle the highest interest rate first? Are you going to do the debt avalanche or the debt snowball approach for paying off your debt? There's so many things you want to think about related to that you want to just take a whole day and sit down and look at all your loans, look at all your debt, and figure out what's your strategy, what's your game plan for paying off all of this debt as soon as possible and as effectively as possible. Okay, the next one is one of my favorites here, and it's known as the 24-hour rule. So I like to do this quite often, but anything that I'm gonna be buying that is a big ticket item, I make sure that I sit on it for 24 hours. I have to think about it for 24 hours before I actually buy it. This saves me a lot of money. So for example, if I all of a sudden say, I wanna go to the Super Bowl next week and I'm super excited and I'm about to buy this ticket. I just had this idea 5 minutes ago and I'm gonna buy the ticket, really spontaneous. That's not always a great option. It's great to sleep on it. Think about it for 24 hours. And then if you're still excited about it, then go buy that Super Bowl ticket, or then go spend that exorbitant amount of money on something that you're thinking about doing. But just sleeping on it, man, it saves me a lot of money. It saves me a lot of money when I go out to a store and I see something really nice and I think, wow, I really want this, but it's $400. Just sleep on it. Next day you come back and you realize, I don't actually really want that much. I don't know what was going on with me at the moment. So that's one that you want to think about. Now, the next one is by thinking of the rule of 72. This is a great little rule of thumb that you can use, that I use quite often when just calculating investments. So the rule of 72, essentially how this works, is very simple, but it shows you how fast or how long it's going to take you to double your money with your investment, assuming that you know the rate of return or the interest rate. Now, without getting too technical here, essentially what you can do is, let's say that you expect to make 10% per year from your investments. How long would this take to double your money? Well, you take 72 divided by 10, because that's your interest rate, 10%. So 72 divided by 10, and that would give you 7.2 years that it's going to take to double your money at a 10% rate. So you can mess around with these numbers and you can see if you had 1% interest, it would take you a very long time, take you 72 years. If you had 100% interest, it would take you not even a year to double your money. So you can see how that works, right? And it's one of my favorite little tools that you can use. And there's a number of different sort of ratios and numbers and formulas that you can use to find out, how much money you would have in the future with your investments. You can just look up some things like bank rate that have some great calculators on there. So there's two more in this video, and one of them is to just not buy something that rusts, rots, or depreciates. It's a simple idea that I have whenever I go out and I'm thinking about buying something. Now, you don't have to stick to this religiously, but generally speaking, if I'm at the store and I'm looking at something and I'm saying, well, I have $400 burning a hole in my pocket, I want to buy something for some reason, and I'm looking at something and I'm thinking, does this item that I'm about to buy, does it rust, does it rot, or does it depreciate where next year it's going to be worth nothing? And so that's why, for example, buying a Rolex, I don't have a Rolex, this is not nearly as expensive as a Rolex, but buying a Rolex is not the worst thing to buy because it generally holds its value over a long period of time. It's debatable, but there's some things that if you buy them and you enjoy them, they might hold their value over the long period of time. Whereas a car, for example, don't get me started on cars, but they rust, rot, and depreciate very, very quickly. They are incredibly just devaluing every single year. So obviously you might need a car, but the point here is to just think about the purchases that you're making and just say, what is the value of this item? And if it's a box of cereal, what's the value of this item going to be in 5 years? And if it's cereal, it's going to be $0. Well, you obviously need some food. But if you're buying something else and you're buying some furniture, what's the value of this going to be in 5 years? And just start to think about these things. If you can maybe put some money into things that gain value over time, then it could be worth your time to look into. And the final one here that we're going to wrap it up with, and I think I've ended some other videos like this as well, so maybe you've heard of it, but it is just something that I take very seriously. And that's just to understand that money does not make you happy. And if you're at a moment in your life right now where you're not happy, you're depressed, something's wrong, understanding that money is not going to be the sole solution to fixing those problems. And that's something that I realized a very long time ago, that, as I said, going back to the first point, it's just a tool. It's a tool that you can use for good or for bad, but it's not going to fix all of your problems. And I don't want that to sound depressing, but it's just something that you want to realize, that if you're not happy, making more money might not be the number one solution there. There's going to be other things. It can certainly help. It can certainly help pay your water bill and help you from getting evicted from your apartment. Thanks for watching the video. I'm excited for next week's video. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. Drop a like, leave a comment down below, and I'll see everybody next week.